Hello, this is Ernie Porter. This is my midterm for the fable retelling assignment. As I laid in the grass on the side of the hill, I sighed and spoke aloud into the wind. Ugh, I'm so bored. I'm so sick of doing this all day long. I had counted the blades of grass too many times to count. The sheep I watched ate grass and grazed with such mindless looks on their faces. They looked as if nothing was going on inside their tiny little brains. After doing the same thing day in and day out for so long, I started to feel like I was becoming one and the same with these stupid animals. Nothing exciting ever happened in this boring old village, and I was so exhausted with the same mundane life day to day. I stood up and began walking up the side of the hill towards the top to look out over the village. I put one foot in front of the other until I reached the short peak of the hill that peered out, and I looked outward. I saw farmers tending to their fields as they always do, striking the dirt with their hoes repeatedly, row after row, the same task for hours on end. I looked at the housewives stringing the same 7 sets of laundry on the clotheslines, and the same 85 villagers walking through the streets. Everything was as it always was, and I sighed in boredom yet again. I turned back around, and my eyes grazed the pasture filled with the brainless sheep I look after, and it was at that moment that I realized the power I held within myself. I smiled with mischievous intentions as the plan hatched inside of my head. I could see the excitement I could bring to myself right before my own eyes. I quickly spun back around and looked over at the village with the people going about their business, and from the middle of my chest I bellowed below into a hurried panic. "Wolf! Help me! Help me! There's a wolf attacking the sheep!" And I saw as all the villagers looked up at me on the hillside, and again I screamed, "Help me! There's a wolf attacking the sheep!" And instantly, all the villagers dropped their tasks to run up the hill to help me chase off the claimed wolf. They ran in a manic manner to help me save my flock, but when they reached the summit, they realized the trick I had played on them. A larger farmer stood in front of the group as he shouted at me, "Son, what is going on here?" Rushed and angry directly in my face as I laughed and replied, "I got you, ha ha," in their faces. I saw the looks of disgust from all the villagers I had made believe trouble was afoot, and the farmer sternly and angrily stated, "You cannot cry for help when none is needed. How can we trust your word after this?" I happily smirked back at him and shrugged my shoulders. I felt accomplished as I watched the villagers trek back down to the village, and I was content with myself as I listened to their grumbles. I had caused a stir and gotten the excitement and attention I yearned for on these long, boring days. I felt much better as I turned around and sat and watched the stupid sheep graze around and munch the grass between their teeth. I had entertained myself for the moment, caused some chaos, and that was enough to get me through the rest of the night merrily. There was finally some excitement in my town. The afternoon faded into nightfall, and before long I returned home for the night. I slept like a child, with a warm and proud feeling surrounded me for being so hilariously clever. I returned back to my side of the hill the next day and returned to my normal life. I closed my eyes and envisioned the sight of all the villagers dropping their daily activities and running up the hill to help me herd the flock after I had cried out in the danger of the wolf prowling around. I laughed and reminisced at the memory to pass the time through the day. As the days passed and the mornings passed and turned into afternoon before eventually falling into the darkness of night, my daily routine of boredom returned. I spent 3 days counting the blades of grass and watching mindless sheep graze through the field as my mind began to wander mischievously again. What could really go wrong? What could they really do to me if I did it again? Danced in my head as I thought through the day. The thought of calling out to the villagers again danced like a fire in my mind. I saw the faces of the rushed villagers as they ran up the side of the hill, and their expressions of betrayal their faces would make when they realized I had bamboozled them yet again. The idea became more and more appealing with each passing second as the boredom really sat in. Before long at all, my instincts kicked in and I was moving toward the summit of the hill. As I peered out from the top of the hill again, I saw the villagers once again going about their mundane lives. Farmers were tending to the fields, wives were stringing laundry as I bellowed from the bottom of my lungs once more, "Wolf! Please help! There's really a wolf attacking the sheep!" And just as before, I watched as the villagers dropped what they were doing to run up the side of the hill to assist me as I laughed with devilish intent. When they reached the summit just before they realized what I had done yet again, I laughed in their faces as the same farmer stood before me and sternly looked me in the eyes before exasperately saying, "My son, you cannot cry out for help when none is needed. A man is only as good as his word, and this is the last time we will fall for your tricks," and began to walk back to the village, disgusted. I laughed even harder as I watched the villagers walk back down to the village. I was proud of myself for yet again finding a way to cause a stir in the most boring village in the world. I returned back to work and watched as the sheep move out the field without a cognitive thought in their brains. I moved through the rest of my day happy with myself and returned home to sleep. When I awoke in the morning, I returned back to the pasture to tend to the sheep. I was so bored again within moments, and once again was longing for something exciting to happen. As I walked through the pasture, I counted the blades of grass as I had done before to pass the time. I began to walk to the top of the summit once again, and when I reached the top, I looked back at the pasture of sheep before me when I noticed something in the back of the field. I squinted deeper into the field to try to make out what was back there, and to my shock, I saw something that made my heart stop. I saw a wolf prowling through the back end of the field getting ready to pounce on the herd of sheep, and I turned around and bellowed to the village below me, "Help me! Please help! Please help! There is really a wolf attacking to the sheep." And to my terror, I watched as no one moved a muscle. It was like the village was deaf to my calls, and no one moved an inch to help. In terror, I screamed out again, "Please send help! There's really a wolf!" But once again, no one moved to me at all. I turned back to run down the back of the hillside to save my flock. The wolf had already torn one sheep to shreds, and the rest of the flock had dispersed into the woods, nowhere to be found. I was broken, shocked, and terrified that I felt so alone with no help. I sat down into the grass and wept for my mistakes I had made. I felt completely helpless, broken down when I felt a hand grab on the side of my shoulder. An old wise farmer looked at me from above. He smiled and spoke calmly upon to me, as he said, "Ah, my son, for I hope you have seen the error in your ways. No one will listen to the cries of help from a liar, even when they are telling the truth. You have no one to blame for this situation but yourself."